I think that one of the strongest storylines within Lightfall, as its campaign goes, is the opposition between Keitel and Calus. You know, and here's the thing. They don't say that much about it in the campaign, so if you just played the campaign and only knew about that, you would expect it to be you would think it was kind of weak, but the reality is we've known about this beef for well over half a decade now. You know, it's been going back ever since the Leviathan, since we got the collector's edition stuff for D2 Vanilla, where Calus actually calls out Keitel by name as one of the conspirators. It goes on through all of the different bits and pieces of lore. It was heavily brought to the forefront in the Season of Opulence and the Season of the Chosen, where respectively we were working closely first with Calus and then with Keitel. You have a ton of different bits and pieces that have very clearly acted as a prelude to Lightfall's father-daughter opposition, and this is what's really great about it. You know, they took a big storyline and they brought it to what is, at the end of the day, a satisfying conclusion, whilst also giving Keitel a foot in the door where her story can continue, and this is now just a really important part of her character development, and she's grown from this. That stuff is really strong all on its own. It stands in this really kind of like respectable place, I think. The thing that really irritates me is actually the fact that this was put alongside new characters. Now, here's the thing. The Cloudstriders contextually make a lot of sense. When you talk about Nimbus, they are most definitely someone who should be in the story, considering that it's on Neptune. But I can't imagine that it would have been way stronger if we had been introduced to these characters at a sooner point, or if the expansion had them in some context where we knew we would be able to unfold their story later. And if they were just sort of an aid that helped us focus on the main plot thrust of things, which was Calus serving the witness, us opposing Calus, us helping Keitel, and then also all of us, this kind of like opposing two sides, racing to get to the Veil and trying to see what's going on with that. You know, if the story had been all about that, I think you could have had a real winner there, because it's focused. It allows you to pull on the more intense emotional thread of the campaign, which is clearly about Calus and Keitel. You could have had more room for all of that. And, you know, it's very easy for me to sit here and say all of this, you know, like, if I was the game developer, I would have done this. But, you know, that's where I think the real strength of Lightfall lies. And I would have loved to see more of that.
Yeah, I think, I think the Cloudstriders were pretty unanimously not the strongest point of Lightfall's campaign. I think it's just a bit of a, I don't know, kind of oil and water. They weren't. It seemed like not really the time to be. I mean, the whole of the narrative of just kind of messing around on Neptune and getting strand. It seems a bit just like, okay, so the worst thing that could have possibly happened is happening. Like the Arbiter of Doom is coming, the big bad villain, and possibly, you know, the end of life in the universe. And now, like, Strand itself, it just seems a bit like there wasn't any reason for us to actually use it. It wasn't like, oh, you have to use Strand in order to unlock the Veil, or like it's essential. They didn't explain why it's important. It's just, we've got this very dire mission to try and stop the Witness blowing up the Traveler or whatever it wants. But then in the meantime, we're like trying to learn this power, and it's like rejecting us, and it keeps getting taken away. It's kind of like, is now the time to be trying to learn some new random superpower that isn't necessary? Should we just stick? I mean, that's what I did personally in the campaign. I was like, you can keep your strand. I'm gonna stick with Void 3.0. I'm trying to like actually do this legendary campaign. Now is just not the time to be messing around with these two random characters that one of them's kind of annoying and one of them's kind of boring, and then they die before you even get to know them. And then it just seemed like the urgency of the overall plot did not match the just randomness of Neptune's. There was a bit of a disconnect between that, and the Cloudstriders were the face of that, so it just seemed a bit like odd.
It's so interesting, because when Bungie talked about all of this in the kind of vidocs and trailers and whatnot, they talked about how they wanted the campaign to feel like an action movie, like an 80s action movie, and in that sense they totally succeed. Here's the thing, and this is a comment that's been made by a bunch of people, that tone was not right for this moment. You are completely correct. This is an apocalyptic story, you know, this is the Infinity War of all this. You can have your heroics, but in service of stopping something really dire, which ultimately we failed to do. And it does feel as though it's a very long extended strand tutorial that is only even possible because Calus is kind of lazy, if you get what I mean. Like, you know, halfway through the campaign, the radial mast gets pulled out of Calus's ship, the Typhon Imperator, and it's supposedly going to link with the Veil, which, you know, for reasons that aren't explained, that's really bad. But it's one of those things of, you imagine that if Calus had really been serving the Witness properly and was really effective, he would have probably pulled that out immediately and would have been, you know, intent on doing that, maybe mission 2. Like, the moment we failed to destroy the radial mast in the one mission where we actually go inside his ship, we should have been scrambling to stop him from deploying it properly, you know? Like, it feels like the only reason we get to go on our little strand tutorial, which is, again, the best way to describe it, is purely because of the fact that we are in this place of like, hey, Calus is just like, find the best place for it. I don't want to bother. You know, reality's situation should be that he is terrified of the Witness, which at the end of the campaign, we do see a moment with that, and that he should be searching high and low to make sure all of that can get done. You know, like,